Carrow Brown. I am an urban fantasy author and the operations director over at Otherworld Inc. And I'm here today to do a drunk book review. Today's book is going to be Crescent Moon by Sarah J. Maas. Short story for that is that I saw a picture of the book and how massive it was, and I was definitely curious. I haven't read anything by Sarah J. Maas before, and so I've heard mixed things about her writing style and her stories, but I was definitely interested to see what this story was about. So I'm kind of walking into this as from the perspective of somebody who doesn't know anything about her work at all. I've heard some mixed things about this book. I finished reading it this morning. Some people love it, some people hate it. Some people are in the middle. There's a lot of back and forth that's going on with it, but I do want to share my thoughts on it. Now, the way that my videos are usually broken up is that as I start off, I talk about things I like, things I don't like, and then when we get further into the video where I'm definitely more inebriated, I start talking about spoilers. But I do make it clear when that's about to happen, so no worries. So we'll go ahead and dive into the first part of the non-spoiler section where I kind of talk about the book in general and my thoughts on different aspects of it. Some of you have been inquiring as to what beverages that I'm enjoying when I do these. I change it up. Today we are using this giant bottle of sangria because it is cheap and I got it from Costco. I do want to say that I am not going to be drinking the entire bottle because that's just not a thing, but that's what I'm drinking. So I finished reading the book this morning, and I definitely have a lot of different thoughts, and some of them are conflicting with each other. The first thing is that, for those of you who aren't aware of what this book is, it basically is set in an urban fantasy setting. There are two main characters whose point of views that we do switch from. There's actually there's three POVs that we switch from. We have Bryce, who's the main antagonist. Not antagonist, oh my goodness. The main character, and then we have the love interest, who is Hunt, and then we have her brother, Rune, and we kind of filter through these different perspectives throughout the book. Rune, not so much. He's kind of there for kind of giving us information that Bryce and Hunt wouldn't learn on their own, which I have mixed thoughts about, but that's me. In this setting, we've got fae, we've got shifters, we've got angels. Like, I have to give Sarah some credit in regards to all the mythos that she has kind of thrown together in this book, and she's put it in a very contemporary setting. I mean, obviously not in a place like, like I can't just walk down the street here and they'd be here. This is in a different setting that way. But the way that she's kind of intertwined the mythos along with like technology and kind of modern mannerisms, I actually did really enjoy that. I thought that was really good. I think for some people who are really into the mythos and they really love their urban fantasy, some of the ways that this is kind of worked together can be a little jarring, but I didn't mind it. I actually really enjoyed that part of the book a lot. There's definitely some character growth that's in the book. Bryce does do a little bit of growing, and you kind of see that in the first part of the book, and then after the incident that happens in the first part of the book. And I really do like seeing how her life changed after the events in the first one. In the very beginning of the book, Bryce is your typical party girl. She goes out, she has a good time, she does whatever she wants to do in the party scene, and she's very carefree. And after the incidents, which I don't really want to talk about because that is a spoiler, she does change and she does become different. And what I really like is that people don't actually take the time to see how she's changed. They kind of use those prejudices against her, or they hold them against her, and then she uses them against them. Like, there's one scene where Hunt has these preconceived notions about how she is and what she's going to do, and she actually uses that to drag him all around town and then show how what she was doing was actually to her benefit and how she was able to get information, and left him feeling like he was a little bit of a twat, which I was like, well done. Very, very nice. I do have to say that Bryce does have the not like other girls feel to it. There are definitely moments where there are multiple males trying to not court her, but they're definitely giving her attention, if you know what I mean. At one point, one of the most important characters in the book basically says, do you want to go out with me? And she turns him down. And then there's also the fact that she's half human, half fae, and then the person who her father is also plays into that. And I kind of rolled my eyes just a little bit at that because there was some foreshadowing in the start when we kind of learned about this relationship that she has with her biological father. And I want to say by the time that we actually met her brother or her half-brother, like just a whole bunch of like things kind of fell into place for me. And that was a little bit of a bummer for me, but I don't know if it's a bummer because I read a lot, if you guys can tell. And I read a lot and I do a lot of research and I understand story structure a lot. So when I see like little tiny things that are kind of like, not red herrings, but they definitely indicate about something that's actually, or the way that things are going to be, when that happens and those Legos fall into place, it kind of is a little bit of a bummer for me, because that's not, I always hope that's not going to be that, and it ends up being that, and then I'm like, I wouldn't say that Bryce is like my favorite character in the story. My favorite character in the story is actually a queen, and she's absolutely brilliant. I absolutely love it when she shows up. My first thought, actually, when I saw that particular queen, though, was that was an author insert, and then once I had that thought, like, it just continued to stay, because this was like the most logical, most well-respected character, and everybody, anyway, that's a me thing. I don't know what to think about Hunt, though. Hunt, obviously, is the love interest. He's the other POV. He's the other main character that we spend a lot of time with. And I have a really hard time not really identifying with Hunt, but, like, trying to... I don't have any sympathy for Hunt. Hunt is a very stubborn person in this story, and while he does have redeeming characteristics, the way that he, like, conducts himself makes it, like, I'm not really interested in wanting to, like, watch him redeem himself. In fact, I hate saying this, and this is just a me thing, but I could have just done without his entire arc and his entire POV in general. Sometimes it felt like he was just being used to kind of but to give Bryce more attention, you know, to focus the spotlight more on her, because with the moment that Bryce usually shows up in a scene and we're in Hunt's POV, like, she just becomes the central focus of the entire scene at that point. Everything's about her and what she's doing, how she's responding to stuff, and all the other stuff. And for me, if we're going to focus on the heroine just that much, I might as well just stay in her POV. But then again, like I said, that's just a me thing. And in the spoiler section, I have another reason why I wish that that was a thing. But we'll get there when we get there. I did not like the writing style. But I don't know if I didn't like the writing style because of the writing style itself, or because I am not the target audience. I am definitely not the target audience for this book. I realized that on page 2. But once I had decided to buy this very large-ass book, I was like, well, I should go ahead and keep reading it, because, again, I've never read anything by Sarah J. Maas. I want to see what the thing is about her and why people hate her, and all that other stuff. So I was committed at that point, even on page 2, when I knew I wasn't the target audience. So for me to kind of explain about this writing style grievance that I have, I'm going to give you an example of how I would write a sentence and then how it would be translated into Sarah J. Maas style. So I actually have an example when I was telling my friend about my reading experience that I'm going to read for you, so I have to look at my phone. Okay, so here's how I would write a particular sentence. She walked into the kitchen and picked up the coffee mug with a sigh. With watering eyes, she pressed the cool surface against her cheek. I miss you, Dad. Here's how Sarah J. Maas would write it. She walked into the kitchen, her father's kitchen, where endless memories of joy and happiness now felt like a slap in the face. She couldn't look at the stove without remembering all the times her father tried to instruct her on how to bake bread. Even though she did it wrong because she was stubborn, he always remained kind and patient. The world needed more of that. Her eyes fell to the coffee cup. The printed words, "There might be whiskey in this," were printed across the front. It was an inside joke, since he had never drank, refused since the first time he gave it a try as a teenager. She picked it up, fighting against the well of emotions threatening to spill out of her eyes. More memories of shared breakfasts and late-night chats filtered through her mind. He would never drink from the cup again, would never be again. He was gone. With watering eyes, she pressed the mug to her face. I miss you, Dad. And this happens all the time. I know some of you are using the made-up example I used of Sarah J. Maas's style and being like, what's wrong with that? There's lots of details, there's emotions, there's da-da-da-da-da. You're absolutely right. There is. And there are times and places for that. My grievance with that in particular is that it is there constantly throughout the book, non-stop, even for moments that aren't actually that important. Like, I almost expected, like, Bryce to look at a bus and be like, there was the bus that she had ridden for the last 2 years in this city alone and shunned by, like it's just non-stop, and it bogs down the story, especially when it happens during action scenes, because that's exactly what happens. There are all these huge, endless thoughts of emotions and thoughts, and it happens at the times when it really shouldn't be there. So that's a personal preference thing. Some individuals are going to really like that very elaborate, very detailed writing style. And again, for me, it has a time and place. Had that been a moment, like this little made-up thing that I done, where she had, like, just left the funeral and she was just having an emotional breakdown, that would be perfectly fine. That is a well-accepted time and place to put in that amount of words for that kind of emotion. But it just happens nonstop, and it happens at points where sometimes I'm given information about the setting where I'm like, how does this progress the story? Like, why do I actually care about this particular thing at this time? And it never really comes back for it to be like a key element or very important. It's just the author wanting to give us more information about the world in a way that I really don't need. At the same time, I am going to just be honest and say that my amount of information in regards to the genre and everything that pertains to it does kind of help me fill in the gaps automatically. So when I get to like scenes like that where I'm just given all this information about the world that doesn't actually matter to me, I'm gonna get bored, or that's just how I'm gonna react to it. In fact, there were parts where I either like skipped it over or whatever. But there are people who like that kind of thing. They feel immersed. They feel part of the world. They're getting little tiny tidbits of information. That's gonna be the thing that they want. It's just, that's just not my thing. The one other thing that I do kind of want to point out that happens within the book is that there is information that is withheld from the reader that the character knows. And I am not really a big fan of that because it's just, I'm trying to figure out how to explain it. Okay, I literally can't explain it without getting into spoilers, so when we get there, I'll complain about it there. So the other thing that I had a really hard time with in regards to the reading and the writing style of this is the voices. If I did not have this in an audiobook form with the narrator actually making sure that each voice sounded very different, they actually all sound the same to me. Like I got it on the Kindle as well, and I was kind of flipping through it, and I would only just look at the dialogue between some characters, and there was literally almost no distinction between the majority of characters and the way that they talk, and that kind of threw me a little bit, and I really don't like it. They all have the same diction, they all have the same vocabulary, they all have the same manner of speaking, which is also the same way that the narration of the book is speaking as well. And there's a juvenile element to it, which, you know, would fit for Bryce. Like, for Bryce's point of view, that would fit perfectly. But when we go into Hunt's POV, and he is, like, hundreds of years old, I'm not saying that he needs to act like he's hundreds of years old, or at least I would just expect his vernacular to be a little bit more advanced. That's all I'm saying. There's also a lot of telling, in this book. Like, I get told how people feel all the time. You know, he was angry, he was bubbling with fury, and sometimes it sounds really cute, and other times I'm just like, I would rather just kind of see how his face is getting red and the clenched fist, other than saying his rage made him clench his fist, because that happens very frequently. And if I did not have the audio that was just playing for me, there are lots of places I probably would have just closed the book and walked off from it. But with that said, I did still finish the book. I did still get to the end. And if I had to give it an actual like star rating, 1 to 5, I'd probably give it maybe a 3. And I'm giving it a 3 because there's a lot of work that went into it. I do still appreciate the world building. There are some character arcs and some parts of the story that I really do enjoy, but those are all spoilers, so I don't want to get too deep into that. And there's so much passion that's in it. Like, I can definitely feel the passion in this writing, and I like feeling that. Sometimes you pick up a book and you know that's just written to get a buck. And I don't really get that from here. I get that Sarah J. Maas really cares about this world that she wrote, and the reason that she wants to share so much of it with us is because she's very passionate and very involved with it. I just kind of, again, wish that there were more organic ways to kind of introduce it to us without having to stop action or stop what's going on in the story to deliver anywhere between 1 and 3 paragraphs of information. But again, personal preference. If you love this book and you think I am wrong, I totally accept that. Please feel free to elaborate on that down below in the comments. I would love to have a discussion with you. Again, this is just an opinion that I have. I am more than happy to have discussions with individuals, and if there is something that I have missed, or maybe you think that I do not understand, again, I am willing to talk it out and hear what you have to say. Comments down below. I look forward to chatting with you. With that said, though, we are going to go ahead and move into spoilers, which I'm not sure how long this is going to be because I do have a lot to say, but we'll go ahead and just start with small steps, with me having another drink, and then we'll get into it. I legitimately do not like Hunt. I really don't. The reason I don't like Hunt is because, okay, so for me to explain this, I need to go back to the earlier comment about how there are things that the characters know, but they're not sharing it with the reader, which I do not like. Because I get that in one sense this is the way that the author is trying to kind of withhold information and make plot twists, right? But these plot twists, they're terrible. I really don't like them. So we know that Bryce is not like other girls, right? She's half human, half fae. She's the daughter of a royal, right? She's somebody that's going to be really important. And there are prophecies and there are other things that have to do with the first light and all this other stuff. And one of the things that happens within the story is that at some point somebody makes a comment that the first light is leaving the Fae and only certain people have it. And her brother has a little bit of it, but apparently his sister Bryce doesn't have anything. And I'm like, oh no, that's not going to be a thing. She's the special chosen one, the power that nobody has control over. She's going to have it. Like, and nobody at any, like, she knows that she has it. That's what ticks me off about it. She knows that she has it, but this information isn't shared with the reader until like close to the end of the book when she finally starts to use her power. And I freaking hate that. And the reason I hate it is because I would have rather read her struggle with knowing that she has this power and her frustration at wanting to be able to use it to help other people but having to hold herself back. There is literally no point in the story up until that point where, you know, she's sitting there and she's thinking about how she wishes that she could use her powers, or, you know, if her powers were working or anything like that, because her powers do get hindered a little bit, because in the start of the story she gets attacked by this demon that leaves some venom in her leg and that stops like her magical abilities, but at the same time nobody knew that she had magical abilities, right? And this is where the deception of the reader comes in, because they're basically trying to paint her off as this, you know, this half-breed that has like no ability, but at the same time she knows that she does. And I would have really loved to have seen that frustration of her wishing that she had that power, and seeing that this one little tiny thing that she has she doesn't even have, and watch that struggle. But no, we didn't get that. That didn't happen at all. Towards the end of the book, when she's running towards like this thing that she has to stop, she just kind of like, I'm gonna use my power now. Bing! It's stupid. I really hate that. And since we're talking about stupid things that involve Bryce, I have a major grievance that happens in this story that pisses me off to no end. But I have to have another drink because, I usually see this in anime. Anime is very notorious for doing this, where you have a female main character and there's some kind of big bad thing that's going on, right? There's some big bad thing, and, you know, it's got to be conquered and everything else. And everybody else, all the competent people, right? All your warriors, all the people that could fix the thing, whatever, they are at some point forced to stop what they're doing and watch her go and do the thing that nobody else can do. It's literally like, kind of like, wow, look how amazing she is. Look at her doing the things that nobody else can do. I hate that trope in anime. It drives me absolutely nuts. It's in this book. There is a scene at the end where the bad guy basically reveals themselves. I won't ruin it for you, but they reveal themselves, and what does she do? She gets into monologue. That drove me absolutely nuts. That's like the worst trope in comics and movies and games, everything. The monologuing. And this guy isn't just kind of like holding back. He's giving away everything. He's foretelling everything, why he's doing it, all that stuff. And I know, like, he thinks that, I was like, oh, well, you know, you're gonna die in a minute, so it doesn't matter if I tell you and I have to gloat to somebody. You know, that's usually, like, why people think that they do it. But this guy does it too, like, excessive. Like, he's giving away, like, every tiny little detail. And it doesn't, like, I hate it. I hate it so much. And the entire thing is recorded, too. Like, there's a room full of very important people, you know, in the government. And at some point, like, they get access to this broadcast about her talking to the antagonist, who's been the mastermind behind everything that's going on. And they all watch as she pulls this little confession from him bit by bit, even though she's not really doing a lot of pulling. He's literally, it's a lot of info dumping from him for the sake of the author explaining everything that's going on in such detail that I don't need to know some of these things, but here we are listening to everything. And then this room of very important people who are very competent warriors and very official government figures continue to just sit there and watch as she basically, like, fights with him and battles him and then eventually kills him, right? That does happen. But they're all just watching. It's like, oh fuck, oh god, you know, and they're not doing, like, they keep saying, like, where are the Ox, who are, like, you know, the law enforcement of this world? And, like, they just sit and they watch, and I hate it. Like, go do something. Like, leave the room. And at one point, they're kind of like, all our competent warriors are here guarding all the important officials. Like, oh, that's great. Like, the reason I actually really hate this trope, it happened before anime. It happened in fan fiction when, you know, somebody would make a Mary Sue character back in the early stages of Mary Sue's, where they would, you know, they make their little character and put them in the universe, and they would go around and have adventures, and they would have a good time, and they would want to write a scene where they showed how important and how competent they were and be acknowledged by the rest of the cast. And they would be like, oh, gee golly, look at you going ahead and saving Captain Kirk from those aliens, and then you managed to repair the engine in the Enterprise, and not only did you do that, but you happened to help Dr. Bones save a life. Man, you are the shit. That's practically what it felt like in that chapter of the book. And what made it worse is that my spouse was listening to it with me, and his commentary was probably the most amusing part of it, because he agreed, like, it was bad. Like, the monologuing was bad. Having everybody watch her be amazing was really bad. Like, I hate that. That is the one part of the whole book that if I could cut it or rewrite it, that's it right there. And that's not saying that I don't like seeing strong female characters. I just don't like seeing it presented that way. I would rather see a female character overcome adversity and difficulty side by side with the person that she wants to be with. And that's probably what made it worse for me, is that in the scene where this is happening and Hunt is forced to observe her either about to die and eventually kill this person, is that he is in no position to do anything. He is powerless, he is stripped of all of his abilities and all this other stuff, and so he can only just sit there and watch her, like, do this thing. And on the surface, that seems like a really good idea, but with the way that this was executed, it felt very lazy, it felt very cheap, and it definitely felt very Mary Sue to me. And then, of course, like, right after that is when, like, everybody starts to respect Bryce, because at this point, at least up until this point, nobody liked Bryce because of what happened in the incident in the first book. Her most beloved friend was murdered, and they saw some of her conduct around when that happened, and they just, like, she's been dealing with the consequences of that for a very long time. And there's a lot of bullying, there's a lot of peer pressure, people keep calling her trash and all this other stuff. And that remains pretty constant up until this point where, she killed the bad guy. The government officials saw it, but while she's kind of running around the city trying to help the city from the new thing that happened, which is, like, demons got unleashed onto the city, and so people are trying to get into safe houses, and she's fighting, and this werewolf clan that wanted nothing to do with her for the longest time is now, like, looking at her like, oh, that's our alpha. That drove me nuts. They're all like, that's the alpha. Look at her running around and helping people. She's not a wolf. She's not a shifter, but okay, well, here we are. But, I guess what I really don't like is the whole Bryce isn't like other girls thing. And I have to go back to the whole thing about the information being withheld as well, because okay, so one of the things that I don't like about the way that the POVs are done is that in some ways it is done to hide information, again, like I said, from the reader. But, like, Hunt in the story is actually part of something that is going on. Like, he's really involved. And while he's talking to Bryce and stuff like that, it never actually pops up in his thoughts or anything like that. Now, if I switch over to Bryce's POV, he's probably having those thoughts right then. But for somebody who's falling in love with, Bryce and knowing the things that he knows about Bryce and what his conduct is, I would think that the shady shit that he's doing on the side is going to bother him a lot more. But when we're in his POV, these thoughts never surface. In fact, when the one plot twist that came up with him being part of, like, this group that was trying to buy, like, this illegal drug came up, I called it right before it happened. I was like, oh, it's him. That's that weird phone call shit he's been doing since, like, page blah blah blah. And sure enough, that was it. And I was just like, God, that was so lame for me. And the reason it was lame, again, has to go with the way that the information was being presented to the reader. And if you're going to write from two POVs like that, I need to see those thoughts. I really do, because I know that motherfucker is going to get bothered by the fact that he's involved in the thing that Bryce is trying to stop, and I don't know how he can look at her without not having it, like, occasionally pop up in his mind. But it never does. We never get a hint of it. So when the plot twist actually comes with him being involved with it, it's cheesy and it's lame. And in all honesty, this book should have just stayed written in Bryce's POV if that's something that we were going to do. Like, I guess what I really don't like is how predictable some of this book was for me. And again, I don't know if I blame the writing style or blame the fact that I read this genre and lots of other genres very extensively. But, like, there's this one scene where, like, Bryce and Hunt, they're getting kind of hot and heavy, right? Like, and my first thought when I started, like, kind of getting to that part was like, oh, there's no way there's going to be penetration, because at this part in the story, he doesn't have his wings. And sure enough, that didn't happen, because you can't have sex with an angel without, like, his wings, like, popping out, like, towards the end. So, I hate that. It's just little tiny things like that where I'm like, that's super predictable, and things that I don't want to deal. And then, like, for as smart as Bryce is, she doesn't connect dots very well, which kind of drives me nuts. She's got a friend named Fury who's, like, this very super feared assassin. Like, all I hear from other POVs about Fury is just how badass and scary she is. I don't actually ever get to see this. I just get to hear about it. That drives me freaking nuts. Like, I'd rather just see her be a badass and doing all the lethal shit and not just hearing about it. But an example about what I'm talking about is in the beginning of the book, like, Bryce gets together with Fury. She's trying to avoid, trying to get over, like, a bad night with, like, this guy that she dumped. And Fury brings drugs. There's drugs in the story. And they get, like, totally high and they're having a whatever time. And when she goes home and finds out the thing that happens, Fury stops talking to her for a very long time, like almost the entire duration of the 2 years. And Bryce never connects the fact that Fury feels guilty about the fact that if she had not been getting Bryce high in the club, then they could have been actually helping and doing all this other stuff. Like, she never really thought that, like, Fury must feel guilty about what happened that night. It was always about, like, Fury doesn't talk to me. Fury doesn't want to talk to me. She doesn't return my calls. Why doesn't... Yeah, like, nobody does this. And also, the mutual friend that they have, she's freaking garbage as far as I'm concerned, because she's got these two people that she cares a lot about and literally doesn't do anything to try and, like, bridge the gap between them. She's just like, oh, well, you two are boats at the sea and you'll figure it out. Like, no, that's not how friendship works. I hate telling you that, but if you got friends that you love very dearly and you see that they're fighting, you are going to make little subtle pushes to get them to come back together. This mutual friend that these two have, that doesn't happen. She's too busy focusing on her dancing career as far as I'm concerned. There was another book review I did. I think it's like the last one I did because I haven't done a drunk book review in forever. But in it, I basically talked about crutch words and why if you use a word too often, it becomes like tedious and people get bored with it. And the crutch word in this book is going to be fuck. Don't get me wrong, I like the word. I like to say it, I like how it rolls off my tongue, I like that click at the end. It is a very nice word. What I don't like is the excessive use of it in this book. It is used so often that I feel like I'm teaching high school again. And for those of you who are not aware, the way that high school students usually talk to each other is to have the word fuck between every word in a sense that they're trying to say to you, which is what it really felt like in this book. There are a plethora of other cuss words that you could use, but for Sarah J. Maas, she decides to use the word fuck and use it in such an extent that I really have a very hard time respecting a lot of the writing in this book just because of it, because there are parts of it that come off very juvenile, and maybe that's because, I'm going to state this again, I'm not the target audience. I'm a little older than this book is probably meant to aim for, but I have a really hard time, it's just so edgy. It's just like, oh man, look at them, and everything's fucked, and he's fucked, and she's just fucked up so bad, and fuck. Like, there are other words to use. Sarah, you are a smart person with a wide vocabulary. Use it. I think the thing that really bothers me about this book, and this is going to be me kind of bitching as an author, so gather around, my friends, let's have a Carrow rant. One of the things that happens when you are an author and you first venture out into publishing is that you are expected to follow the writing rules. There are writing rules in regards to pacing, word count, character arcs, all that other stuff. And then usually, if you show to have consistent sales up until like your third, maybe your fourth book, those writing rules kind of get like lifted off you just a little tiny bit. You can kind of see it with One Foot in the Grave. You can see it a little bit with Ilona Andrews at sometimes. And you can definitely see it with this book. The fact that Sarah J. Maas has such a huge following and people that love her stuff is really prevalent in how much that she does with this book, that if a first-time author tried to do it, they would get denied every time. For starters, this book is too long. You could probably cut 100,000 words out of it and then still have the exact same plot and a lot neater and a lot more condensed, and it would still be good. But because Sarah J. Maas has her huge mass following, she doesn't have to worry about things like word count. First-time authors, they would, and if they came to anybody with a book of this size, they would get denied. Like, that's just how it is. And this, it's not just like her. It's like, there are other authors that once they get like a certain fan base, they don't have to worry about things like word count or anything like that, or editing, or any rules like show don't tell. There's so much telling in this story that drives me absolutely nuts. Earlier, I talked about Fury and about how we hear about how much of a badass that she is. She's such a fucking badass. Somebody says her name and it gives the whole room shivers, but fuck if I know why. I don't see this bitch do anything. And I really hate that there's a lot of times where people like say somebody's name and then we just have to stop and we have to do the minor info dump about them and how everybody like awes or respects or hates them or anything like that. I hate it. I really don't like it at all. It just drives me absolutely nuts. But I am absolutely confident that if I had this manuscript, right, and let's just say we just took Sarah's name off of it, right? We take Sarah's name off of it, put somebody else's name on it. Maybe we'll put like, I don't know, Susie Blue. right? We'll put Susie Blue on it. Susie Blue trying to go out there and she's trying to find an agent or a publisher for this book. I absolutely guarantee you it would get rejected nonstop because it doesn't follow any of the writing etiquette that we are told to follow. You know, there's all this telling, there's all this info dumping, there's all this pacing problems, there's like so many, there's plot holes in this. I don't want to really dive into the plot holes, but those are prevalent. There are plot holes, and then there are just like those description issues that I talked about when it comes to the writing style. Nobody would pick this book up. Nobody. Nada. And the reason why this bothers me so much is because you know that you're going to have fans of Sarah J. Maas who are going to read this and they're going to see that this is what is publish worthy, right? They're going to see that this is what is publish worthy and they're going to write in this style. And then they're going to have a hard awakening when they try to go and find an agent or a publisher and they're going to get constantly denied. They're going to have to go through a whole bunch of developmental editors. They're going to have to go through a whole bunch of critique partners to get it to be publishable. So for me, this is a major cash grab from the publishers. It really bothers me a lot that they're not taking the time to actually make sure that this is up to the quality that they would make new writers do. And I think that it's very sad and it's very discouraging when you know that at some point when you actually get like to the fan base quota and you generate the amount of sales that they want, that they just basically just don't care what you write anymore. You can pretty much just write and leave in typos and people will read it and absolutely love it. But because you make the money and you're making the money on your name alone, they're not going to care. And you can spin that as me being disgruntled about the way that that's run, and that's totally fine because I am honestly disgruntled. I find it really discouraging, and I also find it really insulting because a lot of authors, including indie authors, work very, very hard to make their books as publishable as possible, and then you have individuals like Sarah J. Maas and a few others who I mentioned earlier who basically can break all the rules and write however they want, and they don't have to worry about the repercussions of that outside of some disgruntled reviews on Goodreads. And I don't like it. There you go. And you're going to find that pretty common with a lot of writers who are working very hard to push out the best work that they can and all of that, and only for, you know, us to look at individuals like Sarah J. Maas who basically can just do whatever they want and they make tons of money off of it, where we basically are told like, oh no, you're not at the status of this person, so therefore you still have to follow these rules. Like, I hope what I'm saying is making sense and I'm just not rambling too much. Now, do I think that this is an issue with Sarah herself? Absolutely not. No, this is an issue with the publisher and the editor that they assigned her. I think that when you have an individual who you know can produce quality work, which Sarah J. Maas has done, you should continue to make sure that that work is the best that it can be. That is not prevalent in the story. It is very clear that there was a very laxed approach to the editing process of this book. They left in as many words as possible. It's a very long book. With a lot of information that wasn't needed, wasn't prevalent to the story, and was just kind of left in either because maybe, I don't know, maybe Sarah decided that she didn't want to cut out words, maybe the editor was just told to do a light edit. It's hard to say, but this isn't really an issue with Sarah herself. This is an issue with the publisher and what they decide that is publishable worthy and how much money that they want to make. So that's my rant on that. I'm going to stop now. So, I was going to say, despite everything I don't like about this book, but it's still a 3-star to me. Again, I can still see the very, very vivid passion in this book that Sarah has put into it. I do like the world building. I know some people don't like the edginess of it, or they don't. I read a couple of reviews. I did read the reviews, where some people said that was basically her previous series and put in a different setting. And I'm not going to point a finger at that, just because individuals, when they find a genre that they really do like to write in, they're going to kind of find a way to remold it into whatever project that they're doing. I'm very notorious myself about that with Norse mythology. I find ways to work it into a lot of different settings. So I'm not going to fault her for that. Some people are, but in my opinion, for that personal critique that some individuals may have, I don't really think that that's very fair. So just leaving that on the table. Alright, so at this point, I've drank 3 of these full of sangria. I probably need to stop, so I'm going to go ahead and put in my closing thoughts. I'm still going to leave this at 3 stars, again, because I can see that there's a lot of love and passion in it. I really wish that the publisher had taken the time to really kind of like just tighten this up and make it the best that it can be. I think that if you took out literally Hunt and Rune's POV out of the story and just left it with Bryce, and then you had her, you know, kind of focus on the inner conflict in regards to her power from her bloodline and all that other stuff, this would be a really fantastic story, and I would absolutely gobble that up. But as it is, it reads like a massive teen angst info dumping story. And the only reason I'm honestly giving it 3 out of 5 stars is because the world building, again, really kind of hits me in the right spot. There are certain characters in here that I really do like, that do stand out to me, and I really wish that the story may be more about them, because their dictions and their mannerisms and the way that they conduct themselves is way better than the main cast, who, again, all sound the same to me. But this is my point of view. I literally just finished reading the story this morning. I digested it throughout the day. I would be very curious to hear what you have to say about this story, if this is something that you have read. And if you are sitting here and you are listening to me ranting about this book and some of the things that I don't like about that, please do not let that stop you from giving it a read yourself. I don't want you to come in here and hear what I have to say about a book and then be like, I'm not going to buy that. You know, there's a preview that you can read. You can see if you want to read that. Go ahead and give it a shot. But don't just kind of like just cut something off because I personally say that I don't like it. Keep in mind, you and me, very two different individuals. We have very different likes and wants. I would rather you go and give something a shot based and make your own decision rather than just hearing me and cutting something off. Like that's really not my intention here. But yeah, again, if you've read this book and you like it and you think that I am very badly representing different aspects of this book, again, comment section down below. I would love to have a conversation with you, especially a productive conversation. Name calling not necessary, but if you feel the need to throw it in there because you are very passionate at this moment, I understand. I will overlook it. Again, I just want to kind of see what it is about parts of the story that you really do like. Why do you like it? Why is it a thing that you really enjoy? Help me understand just a little bit more. Just because, as I said, I think maybe twice in this video so far, I am not the target audience. I know that I am not. And I would really like to hear what you guys have to say about why you loved it and all that fun details that go with that. But I'm done. I'm going to go take this bottle and maybe have another glass, call it a day. Thank you guys so much for sitting in here, listening to what I have to say about this book. I hope you found it entertaining. If not, that's okay. Either way, if you leave a like on the like button down below, that's cool. Leave a comment just to express your thoughts and feelings on my video. That's very cool too. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Have a good day. I will see y'all later.